Now, Mike, I've seen some youth ministries that operate like a seminary where it's
Yeah.
all seriousness and just like no fun. We
Yeah.
are not going to have fun,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
Don't you dare smile or laugh. One's coming to mind. I've also seen others, though, that they're just all fun with no substance. It's kind of like, yeah, we're gonna make this like extended daycare, but
Yeah.
that's it. How can we find a good balance between strong theological teaching and also the fun games and events that kind of get thrown on a schedule?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important question, and frankly, it's become one of my hobby horses. Is just a theological understanding of fun and games and recreation. I think is really important. I mean, God created the world. You just look back in Genesis 1 and 2. The Garden of Eden was full of life and joy, and God told Adam and Eve to go eat and enjoy the fruit of every tree in the garden, to cultivate the ground. That God created recreation, God created fun, that it's a good thing to enjoy this life and this world that God made. And so it's not a bad thing to play games in youth group. If you're playing games in youth group because that's what you have to do to get kids to come, that's the problem. Because then you're winning them with fun and games. I mean, it's the old cliche, what you win them with is what you win them to. So if you're winning them with fun and games, then you're winning them to fun and games, and you just have to keep upping and upping and upping your fun and games each week. Otherwise, you're losing them. But if we're using fun and games with a theological foundation, then we're using fun and games to enjoy and embrace joy in this good world that God made. We're cultivating friendships with one another. I mean, I know that at least in my youth group, we have kids who go to a bunch of different schools, and what do they call each other? They call each other rivals, right? I mean, I compete against your school, and you compete against that school. And then they come to youth group and they're supposed to be friends and they're supposed to be one unified group. And so you use fun and games to tear down those walls so that students from different grades, of different genders, from different competing schools are now playing together. They're not competing against each other. They're playing together to tear down the walls, because it's really hard to love someone you can't laugh with. And so if your youth group never laughs together, and if you can't play together, how are they supposed to love one another, right? Like if you can't throw a dodgeball at someone, how are you supposed to pray for them in a prayer circle?
Yeah, and I'm glad you've talked about this, because I've been in churches where there was that idea that like no fun, like we should not laugh, we should not have fun. It is all seriousness. I've seen the other extreme where the success of youth ministry was based on how many events were on the calendar.
Yeah.
And when I say events, I'm not talking about like theological events. I'm talking about like fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so both of those extremes felt wrong and felt awkward, and they weren't profitable. And so what you've just said, I think, and it's a tough tension and tough balance to manage, but that is so important. So what role can parents play in this when it comes to instilling that theology and that theological teaching in their kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things that we can do as parents is to ask questions to get our kids thinking. So I'm a youth pastor. I'm also a dad. My son is 14. My daughter is 11, almost 12. And I just try to ask a lot of questions and have just normal conversations with them about what's going on in our world, what's going on in their lives and in their friends' lives, and what do you think? It's always a great question to ask is, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? And just to see what your kids are, how are your kids making sense of the world around them? And I think that there's a difference between teaching theology and teaching theologically. And I'm a big fan of teaching theology. I think that's important and essential to a certain degree. But I think it's even more important to teach and to parent theologically. So we're helping our kids, whether we're parents at home or whether or not we're youth pastors at church, to to engage our students' minds and worldviews, to help them to grow and to think theology and to think theologically, just about their child's and adolescent worldviews, and how do they make sense of the world and struggles and bullying and what they're learning at school and friendships and all of that. Because our kids, it's hard to be a kid. It's hard to be a teenager.
Yeah.
And there's some real depth that our kids are working through and navigating that we might not realize unless we're asking questions and giving them space to really think about and lean into those conversations with them.